Löwenstein's formative years in Austria-Hungary were pretty tough after he arrived in the world in June 1904. But eventually Löwenstein took up a profession that would change his life forever. He became an actor. Soon his unique persona was causing a stir in Hollywood, and he ultimately made a huge impact on the silver screen. His stage name? Peter Lorre, a legendary movie villain. Now, if you were to reel off a list of Hollywood's greatest villains, Lorre would have to be near the top of it. Few actors in the industry have matched his intimidating performances. But the early part of his life was a minefield that he had to carefully navigate before even thinking about his future goals. Lorre's younger years. Back in Austria-Hungary during Lorre's childhood, the future Hollywood star had been the oldest of 3 kids in his household and had spent a lot of time with his mum. His dad, meanwhile, was balancing 2 very different careers, one as a bookkeeper and another as an army lieutenant. Unfortunately, that meant he didn't see much of his family. A tragic loss. Although not ideal, at least to start with, Lorre had one parental figure to lean on. Sadly, though, things took a tragic turn when he was just 4 years old. At that point, his mum suddenly passed away, and there were yet still worse times ahead, filling the void. Following the death of his wife, Lorre's father was hopeful of finding someone to fill the maternal void that she left behind at home. He didn't want the kids to be alone while he was away. So the widower started a romantic relationship with a woman named Melanie Klein, and she was already very familiar with the family. New stepmom. You see, Klein had been a close pal of Lorre's mum before she died. Anyway, after they got together, his father went on to pop the question, leading to their wedding. Once the pair had exchanged their vows, Klein officially became the kids' new stepmom, and it seemed as though things were moving in a more positive direction. That wasn't the case, though. A horrible dynamic. Unfortunately for Lorre, Klein didn't treat him in the way a loving stepmom would. Instead, she reportedly subjected the youngster to a lot of cruelty, which left him utterly terrified. It even got to the point where he'd dive below his bed to avoid her piercing gaze in the house. And this wasn't just a phase. Either it went on for years, mysterious death. But as the toxic dynamic continued to simmer at home, Lorre's personal life was made even harder once troubling rumors started to emerge about his late mum. As we suggested earlier, her death had come as a real shock to everyone. Prior to that, she'd seemed to be living a healthy lifestyle and had shown no signs of underlying illness, so the cause of her passing had been a bit of a mystery. Scary speculation. In the end, it was believed that Lorre's mum had ultimately died after contracting a lethal bout of food poisoning. Now, here's where the rumors came in. Without beating around the bush, some folks started to wonder if Klein had played a role in what had happened. But after all, the sudden death had opened the door for her to join Lorre's family. Could it be true, though? Time to leave. Well, given his nasty experiences with Klein at the house, Lorre didn't exactly dismiss it. Suddenly, her behavior was cast in an even more sinister light in his eyes. So during his teenage years, the future Hollywood star made a huge decision. Yes, he began to plot an escape route to get away from his stepmom and start a new life for himself. The next step. Taking the plunge, Lorre eventually left his family home behind as a 17-year-old. He was finally free of Klein's constant cruelty. But now, the teen had to answer a really big question: what came next? Out on his own, he needed to come up with a way to support himself. Thankfully, though, Lorre wasn't short of ideas. Banking and acting. After packing his bags for Germany, Lorre opted for a clerk position at a bank. Perhaps his dad's financial career had influenced that decision. He bagged the role and seemed to be set for the time being. Yet something else piqued his interest, too, and it was a far cry from banking. Yep, the young man started to think about becoming an actor, a valuable experience. So, Lorre attended some local stage acting classes, hoping to get a better idea if he was suited for it. It quickly became apparent that the young man had talent. and he landed parts in plays in various cities. The fledgling performer trod the boards at venues in Berlin, Germany, as well as in Austria and Switzerland. Love is in the air. After a tough start to life, things were looking up for Lorre, and life only got better as he continued to indulge his acting passion. During his time in Berlin, the future star was introduced to an actress who also performed on stage. Her name was Celia Lovsky, and they immediately hit it off. The duo soon became an item, leaving an impression. But Lorre's good fortune didn't end there. His performances on stage eventually caught the eye of a movie director, and not just any old filmmaker, the iconic Fritz Lang. The legendary director got a first-hand view of the actor's funnyman skills and timing, which he'd honed after getting cast in a batch of comedies. Hidden Darkness. Yet Lang saw something else in Lorre's stage performances. Looking a little deeper, the director believed that there was a darkness bubbling under the comedy. For that reason, he thought the actor would be perfect for his next filmmaking project. So, he recruited Lorre to star in the 1931 classic M, taking on the role of Hans Beckert, making movies. Now, this wasn't Lorre's first movie role. He'd made his on-screen debut a couple of years beforehand in Die verschwundene Frau, which translates as The Missing Woman, but it was an uncredited part. Then, the actor appeared in 1930's The White Devil. Still, it's fair to say that M was a completely different prospect compared to those projects. He was in the leading role here, and it would change his life forever. Terrifying performance. As Beckert, Lorre got to flex his villainous muscles in front of a huge audience. The character was a terrifying child killer who found himself on the run from cops and criminals alike. It was a challenging part, but he knocked it out of the park. It's almost impossible now to think of anyone else in that role. Extra work. But while M was very well received upon its release, Lorre didn't have the smoothest of times making it. To start with, the actor feared that he wouldn't be properly compensated for his work on the film. So, when Lang's cameras weren't rolling, he returned to the stage to bring in some extra guaranteed income. Painful tumbles. Then, there were the stunts. At one point in the movie, Beckert was set to take a tumble down a flight of stairs, and with no stuntman around back then, Lorre had to do it himself. He winced through 12 painful takes before Lang was happy with what he'd shot. On top of that, a very different problem emerged during another scene as well. The whistling issue. Lang envisioned that Beckert would belt out an ominous whistle throughout the movie, mirroring the musical piece in the hall of the Mountain King. Lorre just couldn't do it, though whistling wasn't among his many talents. So the director had to do it off camera, while his star mimicked the mouth movements, reaching a new audience. Anyway, once M hit the big screen, it was soon given an English dub for international audiences. Just like that, Lorre's masterful performance was reaching even more eyes around the world. And while you might have thought this could only be seen as a positive development, apparently the actor didn't think so certainly in the years that followed. He was convinced that people only saw him as a bad guy. Busy period. It wouldn't be the only part with which Lorre took issue either, as we'll get into a little later. After M, the actor was incredibly busy. He performed in another 3 movies in 1931 and 5 more in the 12 months that followed. But his personal and professional life was turned upside down going into 1933. Fleeing Germany. At that point in history, the Third Reich was growing in power across Germany. Lorre was understandably worried, so he packed his bags and left the country along with Lovsky, fleeing to London, England. Then, as the pair were adjusting to their new surroundings, the M star made a surprising connection. A chance encounter. Yes, one day in London, Lorre randomly met an acquaintance of the legendary movie director Alfred Hitchcock. During that period, the filmmaker was hard at work on his next project, seeking out the perfect actor for the man who knew too much as villain. And Hitchcock was a big fan of Lorre's wonderfully chilling performance in M. Meeting Hitch. Knowing that, the acquaintance set up a proper meeting between Hitchcock and Lorre, The director went on to outline his plans for the movie, going into a lot of detail. His words were met with plenty of nods and grins by the European performer, but he didn't say anything in response. Why? Simple Lorre's English was extremely limited at that time. Another villainous performance. In fact, Lorre barely understood anything that Hitchcock told him during their sit-down. Thanks to his expressions and body language, though, the filmmaker still decided to cast him in The Man Who Knew Too Much, due to the language issue. The actor had to read all of his dialogue phonetically. But it didn't detract from another great performance, marriage and a move. Once the shoot was complete, Lorre then decided to take the next step in his relationship with Lovsky. Yep, the couple became husband and wife before heading off to America for the first time. In spite of his reservations about typecasting, the M-star bagged a couple more roles as villains. He also teamed up with Hitchcock again for 1936's Secret Agent, on-set drama. That was another tough shoot for Lorre, but unlike with M, it wasn't down to stunts or whistling. Instead, he was butting heads with the leading man, John Gielgud. Gielgud was convinced that his co-star was trying to outshine him. In addition to that, it's also rumored that Lovsky's husband was struggling with withdrawal symptoms during that spell as a result of a morphine addiction. The 20th Century Fox deal. Despite all the drama, though, Lorre completed the shoot in one piece. That brings us on to his next set of projects, the Mr. Motor franchise. After signing a deal with 20th Century Fox, those movies occupied most of his time. In total, he made 8 of them in just 2 years. But the star wasn't very enamored with the character. Simmering frustration. As the shoots went on, Lorre grew ever more irritated with Mr. Moto, and while making the last movie in the series, he hurt his shoulder on a rather physical stunt, which finally pushed him over the edge. Yep, the Hollywood star never wanted to talk about the character again once he was done on Mr. Moto takes a vacation. Typecast. After saying goodbye to those films, though, Lorre was faced with a different problem. His fears of being typecast as a villain really came to the fore in this period. His bad guy performances were so good that they were the only roles Hollywood made available to him. Yet he refused all of them. Villainous comeback. And as opportunities started to dry up at the start of the 1940s, he eventually relented and took on a new antagonistic part, but it was a doozy. The film in question was the classic 1941 mystery thriller The Maltese Falcon, which starred Humphrey Bogart. Lorre was cast in the role of Joel Cairo. No one did it better. While Hans Beckert was arguably Lorre's greatest performance, Joel Cairo has to be on the rung just below it. Once again, the actor showcased his unique skill for bringing truly nasty characters to life no one in Hollywood from that time could measure up. But still, he was absolutely desperate to find more roles that moved away from the usual villainy. A disastrous hiatus. Unfortunately for Lorre, his hopes were frequently dashed, leading to a pivotal moment. As the 40s were coming to a close, he went on a hiatus from Hollywood. The Maltese Falcon star instead wanted to try his hand at radio. That didn't work out either, as he soon found himself in financial trouble. Everything seemed to be going wrong. 2 divorces. I won pun boat. Lorre's personal life was also in a pretty bad state by this time. He and Lovsky had decided to call it quits on their marriage in 1945, while his second wife, Karen Verne, only stayed with him until 1949. The disintegration of that relationship coincided with the actor's horrible career slump. Would it get better? You bet he just had to swallow his pride. Hollywood return. And Lorre returned to Hollywood in the early 1950s with a slightly different attitude. Putting aside his former hopes of bagging a wider range of roles, the star by now appreciated that people adored his antagonistic performances. So why try to swim against the tide? He was back in the game. And in 1954, he made a significant bit of cinematic history.